In today's marketing landscape, manufacturers can no longer afford to view marketing as that disposable expense, that department that they don't really need. It is critical that they look at marketing now by implementing effective storytelling, creating personalized messages, and building trust with their customers. It's no longer talk about yourself. It's now understanding your audience and delivering them content that offers value so that they see that you truly know and understand their industry. This is why I'm excited about my guest today. My guest today is Robert Rose. He is the Chief Strategy Advisor for Content Marketing Institute, and he's going to shed some light on how manufacturers can start to create that content that really resonates with the audience so that they can start to form relationships that instill trust. But before we get started, my name is Donna Peterson, and you are listening to the B2B Marketing Excellence Podcast. I go all over the world talking with industry leaders, marketing executives, chief marketing officers, anyone who can help us create B2B marketing campaigns that will resonate with our audience and offer value. Hi, Robert. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Donna. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
You're a perfect guest to have because we all need to know what kind of content do we create that really works?
It's a big question, right? You hear that word content and it sounds like a overwhelming word. And I have had so many CEOs say to me, wow, content, that is just too big a word. I don't even know how we would get our arms around all of that because so much of what we do today is create all kinds of things. Our salespeople, our customer service people, our
Yeah.
marketing people, the executives, everybody, it seems, is creating content. So how do you even get your arms around that? But to answer your question, the way I like to think of it is content is communication. So so the real question is, what kind of communication do we want to create? And usually when we're talking about marketing, we're talking about persuasive content. But in this particular case, what we want to talk about is creating content that's valuable in and of itself, a valuable experience for that consumer, no matter where they're coming from, whether they're an
Yes.
early lead that we want to talk to and nurture, or whether they're an existing customer that we want to nurture and keep retained, or whether it's someone that has no idea what we do for a living and want to make them aware of what we believe in and why we do what we do.
Yeah. And that's so important when you're also talking about industrial brands, because we're not talking about selling just a pair of shoes. We're talking about sometimes selling very expensive pieces of equipment. And that's not going to happen with a one-off email or a social media post. It's going to happen with a whole strategy of content that's put out there to just give value, offer people information so that they can start to trust your brand.
Sure. Yeah. And it's not even one person, right? In
Yeah.
so many ways,
Oh,
when we talk about industry and big, long, very complex sales and marketing cycles, we're talking about committees of people, right?
yes.
Multiple people in a business who are going to act as what we would call a buyer. But it's
Yeah.
how do you satisfy all of those different audiences and personas so that you end up delivering value so that, as I like to say, it's one thing to try and compete against the thousands and millions of entries into Google, but really what we're competing for is that stack of RFPs or that stack of other documents that our buyers are assembling as they try and figure out which solution is going to be the right one for them. How do you stand tall in that big stack?
Yeah. That's a very, can you answer that question for me?
Yeah, well,
That's the answer I want
the
right there.
yeah, exactly. The key is you have to deliver value, right? In
Yeah.
today's world, the information data itself is relatively commoditized, right? Finding out the how to or the details or research around a particular industry or a particular idea is pretty readily available. So the question is, how do you bring your point of view? What do you believe about the world? What do you believe about the future of X industry or
Yes.
what it is you're doing? And how do you bring that value and really float up so that what it is they're reading is just, they can't find anywhere else?
Yes. I totally agree with that because people will say to me sometimes, who are your competitors? And I'll sit there and I say, to be honest, we don't have any competitors. And they're like, Donna, come on, you have to have competitors. You're a B2B marketing agency. I said, yes, we're a B2B marketing agency. We're woman owned. We're 44 years old. We work in the industrial space. It whittles it down to a smaller group. And then you start to show your uniqueness. And we're unique. Every company out there, like you just said, is unique. And they need to take that uniqueness and put it into their communications so that people realize, oh, there's no one else like them. I have to work with them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the saying is there's riches in the niches, right? But
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that you take that's one layer, right? And then
Yeah.
you take another layer, which is very often I'll talk to an industrial manufacturer, say they make something like rain gutters, or they make
Yeah.
something like roofing material, or they make
Mm-hmm.
plumbing supplies, or I
Mm-hmm.
was dealing with one company who makes cabling for the inside of buildings. And it's like, how do you make that sexy? It's not, and the key is that somebody does find that sexy.
Yes.
Somebody, it's important to somebody. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in business. It's important to somebody. So the question isn't how can you tell them the gauge or the different materials it's made out of or all of the stuff that can be easily acquired, but what is it about your particular way that
Yeah.
you solve that problem that actually is forward leaning and or innovative and or unique and or finding your so within the sort of niche that you're in, finding that unique story that you want to tell and the value that you want to deliver, education, inspiration,
Yes.
engagement. How are you delivering that value to a customer before they've ever even met you?
Yep. Yep. And now, as you're saying this, even I'm saying, oh my gosh, that is so much. It is so overwhelming. And this is where I think a lot of manufacturers feel the same way because they have lean or no marketing teams. Can you give us what would be three tactics that a lean team could use to do this storytelling like you're suggesting?
Sure. Certainly, one is to make a decision about where you want to apply this, right? Because the story you're going to
Okay.
tell is obviously contextual to what are you trying to do as a business? Are you trying to drive more awareness of the ideas you
Right.
stand for? Are you trying to nurture people through that, consider rise up through that stack of RFPs? Or are you trying to retain a customer? So once you've made that decision,
Yeah.
one of the things that you can start to consider is what story would we tell that is one level abstracted out from what we do for a living? And I'll give you an example
Oh,
of this.
okay.
The Up in my neck of the woods, Santa Barbara, California, which is just north of where I live, there is a guy who has a roofing company and he manufactures roofing materials and then he has roofing services and it's one of the bigger businesses in Santa Barbara, but it's nonetheless a quasi
Roofing. Yeah.
manufacturing, quasi
Yeah.
services business. And he basically is also, as his content, he has a newsletter and a podcast because the
Okay.
guy has a passion for weather. And
Oh.
he's become a legend in the Santa
Ah.
Barbara area because his weather forecast that he sends out via email and he sends
Yeah.
out via podcast subscription, you can go subscribe to either of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
He's basically more accurate than the AccuWeather, right? He'll go, it's at 12 noon today, around 12:10, it's going to start raining at Butterfly Beach. So you may want to bring your umbrella for just a few minutes. And it's that specific. And he's got this passion for
Wow.
weather and it has become, as he said, his number one advertising and marketing platform. It's
Oh,
what,
yeah.
because, and it's related to what he does,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Rain, weather, roofs, all the things that you're
yep. We're going
doing.
to have a big
Customers.
rainstorm. How's that roof checking out?
Exactly. And think about the story that you might tell one
Oh,
level abstracted out that's valuable to your customer, but aligned with what it is you do, that you could create value at whatever part of that customer's journey you're trying to create value in. For an existing customer, it might be not just teaching them how to do their job, like with a
Yeah.
how-to video and how to use the product, but maybe how to be a better version of them, right? How to be a
Yeah.
better professional, whatever industry they happen to be in, giving them an educational course or using your information, your resources to tell that deeper story. And
Yeah.
start small. Start with
Mhm.
one very specific thing, whether it's an email newsletter or a podcast or a web, resource center or an educational platform, even a print magazine.
Yeah.
All of these things can help you start to take one step toward building that sort of flywheel of content.
Yeah. And you figure that way they're really getting to know the individual, especially with a podcast, this as well as I do. People get to know who you are. As they watch this or they listen to the B2B Marketing Excellence podcast, they'll say, "Oh, Donna's a little quirky." Yeah, you know what? That's who I am. And some people will like to work with me, and some people will be like, "Okay, no, we're not working with her." But that's fine. It's the people who you connect with, they're the ones you really want to work with anyway. And that's
Yeah,
why you've got to get those stories out there.
it's an interesting challenge for sure, because so one of the larger trends that is happening in manufacturing and big industry is this idea of servitization,
Mhm.
where it is really now going beyond just delivering a giant black box machine, delivering products off of an assembly
Yeah.
line or delivering products in a faceless way, but that human element and the experience that is had by the customer is becoming such an important piece, especially in a world of AI and
Oh,
automation and everything that's happening in not only manufacturing, but just across the spectrum of technology. Adding that human element and showing the people, the faces, the
yeah.
experience that people have when they buy and work with you is such an incredibly important
Yeah.
part of marketing today.
And I have to say, I saw the real switch, and I hate to bring it up because everyone talks about it, but I really saw the real switch when COVID hit. And that's
Yes.
when B2B, I always felt was very stoic. As an individual, like when I had my children, my clients did not know. They didn't even know I was pregnant, nothing. I didn't skip a beat. Like you didn't talk about your personal life. We didn't even talk about being a family owned business much. And when COVID hit and we all opened up our houses, and all of a sudden we saw the dogs running through the background and different things happening, I think the barriers broke down. And that's when B2B brands started to say, okay, let's show who we really are. Let's not try to be like ABC company. Let's be us. And
Yeah.
now let's start to tell our true stories.
That's 100% accurate.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Not only did the barriers come down, but our expectations into that digital experience went up.
Yes.
So we stopped comparing the experience we were having with B2B vendor A,
Yeah.
B2B vendor B, B2B vendor C with each other. And instead, the experience I had with this isn't the same that I'm having with Netflix or Amazon or
Yeah.
something like that. So it's like our expectations for the quality of the digital
Yeah.
experiences, broadly speaking, went up as those barriers came down. So it was like everybody had to get good at it
Yeah.
and fast.
Yeah. And that is a hard thing because as marketing evolves, and now, like you said, the AI tools, we're being bombarded with so much every single day. You do sit there saying, uh, sometimes people get paralyzed. You just get paralyzed because there's so much to do that they don't do anything. Or they're like, okay, we'll get started. But if it doesn't work, I see a lot of manufacturers, they'll do one thing right away. If it doesn't work, they quickly jump. They jump
Yeah.
overboard. And I'm like, no, with manufacturing, it has to be nice and consistency. And I've heard a lot of people say it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Indeed. And that's the real key here is that we can get wrapped up in that short-termism of a quarterly performance or monthly
Mhm.
performance. And we forget that marketing, and especially when we start talking about delivery of content marketing, it is a marathon and it
Yeah.
takes time for that investment. One of the things that I'll often have a CEO say to me is, okay, we'll start a blog or we'll start an email newsletter. And the day after the newsletter launches, they're like, where are the leads?
Yeah.
No, You've got to build an audience before you can actually start to influence that audience. So you have to make a thing of the thing before the thing becomes a thing. So you've got to actually invest in the long-term planning, the long-term investment, and the marathon that is content and content marketing. And then you will start to build that flywheel that starts to be an always on 24/7, 365 machine for you.
I think there's a statistic. I wish I knew it exactly on the top of my head. It's about podcasts. And I think a majority, and I know the number's high. I think it's even higher than 75%, but they don't make it past like 10 episodes.
Yeah, no, I
It's
believe the
less, right?
statistic is 80% of podcasts have less than 3 episodes.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, so that's even, yeah. But that's what I'm talking. It's exactly what
Yeah.
you said. Like people put out a podcast and they expect to get all these viewers and they don't. And
Yeah.
they abandoned. And I know for a while for our podcast, I'm like, oh, come on, we're not getting more viewers. And for a while, I thought, okay, maybe I should get some kittens. I'll have some
Yeah.
kittens walk throughout. But then I realized I might get more viewers, but they wouldn't be your target audience. And I think that's when people have to realize, especially in the manufacturing space, like you mentioned before, the areas we deal with sometimes may not be glamorous, but still the people that are most interested, if you offer valuable content, they're going to come and they're going to listen.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. I worked with one manufacturer and I walked into his office and I said, so tell me about your audience. Tell me about your total addressable market. And he picked up a Rolodex and he said, there are 400 businesses in the US that can use our product. Here they are, right? Here's all of them. I know who all of them are by
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, wow. And he's like, what do you do there?
Yeah.
And it's that connection, that one-to-one connection that is so important these days, because once you start thinking about how niche these businesses are, it is not about size of your audience,
No.
especially these days. It's not about size of your audience. It is absolutely the quality and the connection that you have with that audience. I would much rather have, you know, 1,000 people who love and do things and take action on my content than 100,000 people who go,
Yeah.
fine, I have their addresses, but every time I send them an email, it just languishes in their spam box.
Yeah. No, you're exact. I do a lot with like heat treating and metal forming, and there are specific niche areas. So we're not looking at getting email lists because we acquire a lot of email lists from industry specific publishers, meaning we send it through them. We don't acquire their list. We send them an HTML and they deploy it for us, but we're not looking for lists of hundreds of thousands. We're
Right.
looking for sometimes 2,000 or
Yeah.
3,000 because they're in that specific niche area.
Yeah.
So then here would be my question to you about personalizing that content towards these specific niche areas. How can these teams with limited resources really personalize that content?
Yeah. And the real trick here, because you hear the word personalization and immediately people's eyes roll and they go, oh, that again, right? We've been talking about personalization for the last 20 years. And it's,
Yeah.
yes, Netflix and Amazon can do it, but do we really need to do it?
Yeah.
And when we start thinking, so yes, the technology is getting better. The technology is getting easier to be able to do that. But the key is understanding the difference between personalized and personal. In
Uh-huh.
other words, personalized is when you get that email and it says, hello, Robert. I know that you surfed our website and you looked at product 1, 2, 3. And so you may like product 4, 5, 6. That's personalized.
Mhm.
Personal is when I get an email or a piece of content that I have no idea, like that it just resonates. It's personal
Yeah.
to me. It's wow, they really know me. They feel what I'm doing. And it rarely, by the way, am I addressed by name or by my company or by my title or by my
Mhm.
address or by my phone number. They just know things about me that help them direct content to me that's
Yeah.
more personal. And so start thinking about what insight or what data would we
Yeah.
need in order to make an experience more personal so that we can target it to people. Very simple example of that is when we do our webinar programs, one of the areas that we capture is what are you interested in? What
Yeah.
topic are you interested in? Marketing, content strategy, or content marketing?
Mhm.
And we start to tag those people with that. And then we can say, if we're having a webinar on content marketing, for example, I'm only going to send it to the content marketing people in that
Mm-hmm.
audience. And because that's what they're interested in.
Yeah.
And so starting to think about those personal touches that you can add and use, yes, the easy technology that's there to do it can make all the difference in the world. And it's actually achievable and pragmatic.
And that's where when people sometimes say to me, oh, Donna, email marketing doesn't work. And I'll say, I agree with you. It doesn't work if it's not done properly.
Right.
But when you do what you just said, when you get personal with these people and you offer them that content that people feel like, oh my gosh, they read my mind. This is exactly what I need. They're going to listen.
Yeah, exactly right. They're going to listen, and more importantly, they're going to take action. They're going to value it, right?
Yeah.
And the reason we take action on anything is because we have a belief in it. We believe what's being said, and it's
Yeah.
resonant enough with us that it makes us want to do the thing that it's asking us to do.
Yeah.
And that is ultimately the secret of marketing. It's not some super complex nuclear physics code. It's like all we're trying to do is reach people with something, a piece of content that's
Yeah.
valuable, and have them do the thing we want them to do, whether that's buy, explore, subscribe,
Mm-hmm.
donate, explore more, whatever it is. We
Yeah.
want them to do something. And if they do what we want them to do, then we've succeeded as a marketing person.
I always say to my clients, it is common sense, but think about what you act on. Think about what marketing campaigns, or why do you buy a product, or why do you buy only from that specific company? And it's so funny when they do that, sometimes they're like, oh, okay. They don't want to
Yeah.
get those general now, especially now, we're all inundated with marketing messages everywhere. I was even playing golf and you look down in the hole and there was a message down in the hole as I went to go get my ball. And I'm like, when do you get peace and quiet anymore? You don't. So how do you get your messages to stand out?
Yeah. Yeah. And what we often forget, and this is really true in the industrial manufacturing heavy B2B space, is we forget how much it sucks to be a buyer these days, right?
Yes.
How complex it is to be a buyer. It is hard. You have to become a subject matter expert in whatever it is you're buying, and you have to
Yeah.
do all this research, and you have to get a committee together, and it's hard and it's complex. And did you make the right decision? So think about all of the difficulties it is in being a buyer these days, and what would make that job easier, right?
Yeah.
Is it forcing yet more banal materials down their throat so that stack of paperwork on their desk gets
Mm.
higher? Or is it making things easier for them to make a decision? They want it to be easy to make a decision.
Yeah.
Help them make it easy to make a decision.
Yeah, because we're all short on time.
Yeah,
We don't have time to go through all this plethora of stuff. Like making long content years ago was make it really long. And then it was like really make it short. And I know I'm
right.
like, okay, now think about your audience. How do they take in information and create that content exactly the way they like to receive it?
Yes.
I think that's important. So now here I am. I'm a manufacturer. I have a small team. What would be the three types of content we should work on?
That's a great question, and it's contextual, right? And here's the way I'll answer that, because it's hard to answer that without a specific example and being prescriptive. But what I would suggest is one audience, one platform at a time.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, so if you're doing account-based marketing, or if you're doing where you're targeting a whole group of buyers or something like that, so it's picking that one sort of group, or picking that
Okay.
one persona even within that audience, right? Whether it's the CEO or the chief procurement person, or the whoever the user of the product, whatever the right audience and person is that sort of works whatever part of that journey you're targeting, right? So in other words, prioritize, where do you want to start? What's your
Okay.
problem? One of the things that I often do when I first meet a client is I'll draw we usually exhibit it as an infinity loop these days, which is the customer's journey, right? It starts in that lower left with awareness, and it goes through interest, and then it goes through selection, and then there's a purchase right in the center
Yeah.
of that infinity loop, and then we're back around to customer service and loyalty, and back around to awareness again. And I'll draw that infinity loop on a whiteboard, and I'll say, where does it hurt the most? The doctor is in. Where does it hurt the
Yeah.
most right now? And many people will point, lead generation, or they'll point to awareness, or they'll point to somewhere in the beginning of the journey. It's great. Now we have a purpose. Now we have a
Yeah.
target for what it is we want to do and the kind of content we want to prioritize first. What kind of experience to which audience, one kind of platform would make the most impact on that?
Right.
And we want to invest in for the long term, right?
Okay.
So whether that's an email newsletter, whether that's a website resource center, whether that's a blog, whether that's a print magazine, whether that's a podcast, we can get into the nuances of the best ways to prioritize those things.
Right.
Whatever that thing is for you, now we start to treat it a bit like a product. Let's look at our target market, that target audience. What value do they need? What interestingly differentiating ideas can we put on this new content platform that will be of value to them? And then once we're ready with that, we want to promote it like we would any other product in our sort of arsenal or portfolio. We promote it, we do press releases about it, we announce it, we put money behind promoting and building an audience to it. We do all the things that we would put out there like we would any other marketing campaign, right? We want to promote the idea that we're putting good ideas out into the world and you should be part of that if you're in this particular audience.
Right.
One audience, one platform at a time, and build out from there, whether it's further down your journey, whether it's additional platforms to the same audience, whether it's additional audiences with the different kind of platform, et cetera. So scale and do it at a considered pace, but take each step very sequentially.
And so when you tell people to do this, and obviously we talked, it has to be consistent because manufacturing has a longer buying cycle. When do you say, okay, we need to evaluate this to see if we're going to continue and go on? Do you do that after 6 months? Do you do it quarterly? When do you sit back and really evaluate it?
It's a function of it. There's the classic sort of triangle: time, money, and quality, and you get two of those, right? So it is a function of that, right? So in other words, the more money and investment you put into it, it usually equates to a faster amount of time that you can start to equate whether or not you're being successful with it. If you grow this completely organically, it's going to take longer time.
Yes.
And with that notwithstanding, what we typically see is, again, contextual to the part of the journey you're trying to optimize. You can see results within a few months, let's say. Let's say it's, a 6 months. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Not a template, it's not necessarily going to be appropriate for you, but a few months, we can start to say 2 quarters, we've given this a shot, and we've either not created any awareness at all, we're having zero success in getting any audience engagement in this, or we're crushing it. We're getting all kinds of interested things, and we're getting all kinds of new people in here, and we want to think about expanding or building upon it. But setting those objectives and goals first for what it is we're trying to do as a business is critical, right?
Yes.
So many businesses I know, they launch a blog and they're just like, we'll put up a blog and we'll just start putting up content, right? With no objectives, no discernible part of the buyer's journey it's trying to facilitate. And then we're surprised when it becomes a glorified newsroom of our press releases, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing we're talking about. And then we're really surprised when nothing ever happens because it's very little for no one.
Yep. I always feel like when you're saying that, it feels like you're a tree because you're just going out in all these different directions where you really should be on a set path, bringing you right up to those objectives you're trying to accomplish. But all the content, all the blogs that you write have to be talking about something along that line so that you can reach those objectives.
Yeah. Think about yourself. Think about that product, that content platform, like a product, and think about it like a little media company operation, right? What would you be? You're a daily magazine, a weekly magazine, a monthly magazine, or a journal, or you're providing education through a curriculum. Structure out what it is you're doing in a way that creates an editorial and a content plan that makes sense. That I've talked to many manufacturers who have built these kinds of platforms, and the way they like to think of it is we can become the media that we want to see, right? We can become the media where we place our ads currently. We put ads in this magazine or in this journal or on this educational platform, and we put ads there all the time. We can become those things now. We can become that educational platform. We can become that magazine. We can become that thought leader in our industry if we invest in the time and the structure and the content to do that.
and you stay on that path and you put in your uniqueness, you'll be up there at the top, and there's not going to be anyone competing for you because no one can, because
Well,
you're
that's
unique.
exactly right. It's increasingly hard to do that these days because it's just
Yeah.
so big. And it's a popular idea for sure. But if you can bring that uniqueness, it used
Yeah.
to be, let's call it back 10, 15 years ago, you could literally put up the FAQ for your industry and begin to rank on search and get your
Yeah.
questions answered. Those days are gone,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You cannot just put the FAQ of your industry out on your website and call that
Yeah.
content. Nobody cares about that, right?
Yeah.
You've got to, I call them RGAs, right? Not FAQs, RGAs, not frequently asked questions, but rarely given answers. And so if you can get the rarely given answers on your website, you will be a lot better off.
Okay, interesting, interesting. All right, my last question for you would be, what are some of the easiest things people could implement in regards to a digital strategy or tools maybe that industrial marketing teams should be looking into? I know that's a loaded question. You're probably like,
Yeah,
Donna, oh my God, how am I supposed to answer that?
yeah. Look, the first one is there are two that I would think are core. One is some level of managing whatever content platform you're going to create, whether that's a blog or whether you call it a digital magazine or whether you call it a website resource center. And there are a million different ways to solve that problem. WordPress is a common one. Other content management systems are part of that. And the second piece of that would be how to manage that subscribed audience, right? A common way to manage that subscribed audience is so you can start to connect those things.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is to say, and that might be a CRM system, or it might be a marketing automation system, or the newfangled way of thinking about this is something called a customer data platform.
yeah,
But ultimately, what you want is, if you can think about it philosophically like this, you want one database, one area, one repository of all your
yeah.
customer audience, lead, sales data, right?
And
Where
all their
you get
touch
all that
points
first party
are
from the first
together.
time
Yeah,
yeah, from the time that they subscribe to your blog, to subscribe to your newsletter, to
yeah,
become a lead in your system. It's the same person, right?
yeah.
We can see all that wonderful
You,
information
Donna
around.
Peterson, you know exactly what I'm doing.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So those two things are core to anything. And then there are, of course, all the ancillary pieces of technology, that from analytics
Right.
to some sort of email automation, to some sort of looking at, podcasting and social media management and all those things. But I think all those things build around the two sort of foundational efforts, which is your content and the audience.
I totally agree. We've been on the HubSpot platform since
Yeah, there
2010,
you go.
and I have found it for us to be priceless just
Yep.
because everything's all in one place. My team can see it. We can see what everyone is doing, and it really helps us create the content, like you're saying, with more of a personal feel to it.
That's exactly right. HubSpot, Sugar CRM, you've got Salesforce, all of those very big in the industry and manufacturing space.
Yeah. Robert, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I think the listeners are going to get a lot out of this. I think some of our takeaways here for our manufacturing customers out there is now is the time to take marketing serious, because I feel it will help them grow to that next level of
Mm,
growth, get those relationships to instill trust. So thank you so much for your time.
absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the World Innovators B2B Marketing Excellence Podcast. If you'd like to be updated when new episodes come out, don't forget to subscribe. Also, check out our social media accounts to stay up to date on B2B marketing trends.